put it like that, is inconsistent. However, there is a way out of this reductio ad absurdum, and one that takes its cue from Jaynes himself. Jaynes endorsed a different notion of concept, such that consciousness is not necessary for having concepts. You can have concepts without having consciousness. That's what Jaynes writes. In Bloch's terms, such concepts, Jaynes's concepts, are anything but poised for free use in rational control of action. A bicameral person's behavior, including his speech behavior, may witness his possession of particular concepts, yet these are not items for the use of which he or she could meaningfully be held personally or rationally responsible. A bicameral person quite literally would not know what he is doing or saying, nor why he is saying it, in the sense that his mind is constitutionally unfit to explain, elaborate, doubt, or otherwise conduct articulate reasonings about its contents. You may have concepts and still be unable to access these concepts. That's the situation. Now, in my paper on Greek zombies, I introduced a distinction that was not made as such by Julian Jaynes, but I think it helps his position. A distinction between two different kinds of concepts called B concepts, let's say bicameral concepts, and A concepts, let's say access concepts, standard concepts. A concepts are concepts in the regular sense just mentioned. Their identity conditions are substantially determined by their place in a large network of other A concepts. A concepts presuppose A consciousness, for the mental contents of which they are constituents are poised for free use in reasoning. Indeed, it is this very possible use in reasoning that determines the identity conditions of the concepts. That sounds too technical. Forget that. Let's turn to B concepts, the bicameral ones. The identity conditions for B contests are not in any way mentally articulated. Minds with B concepts have no access to anything like, let's say, the inferential relations between B concepts, for the simple reason that there is no such access and there are no such relations. It's a totally different type of concept. This distinction between A and B concepts, sketchy as it is, I admit that, should be worked out further, saves constructivism from a quick and easy death, saves it from inconsistency. It is, following this line of thought, it appeared to be the case, it seemed to be the case, that Bloch was right after all, that the very idea launched by Jaynes is simply ludicrous, the constructivist notion of consciousness, but it can be saved after all. Pace Bloch, a constructivist view of consciousness, is not obviously absurd, I would say. Moreover, I think the idea of B concepts, or the distinction between A and B concepts ruled by identity conditions of a totally different order compared to A concepts, is a very welcome instrument when dealing with more remote fringe minds as well, such as pre-linguistic infants and early hominids or animals. It's a welcome instrument from, let's say, the fringe side of the mind to deal with the behavior of animals, human beings included, that are fairly close to ourselves, but that are different from ourselves in certain important respects, like not the zombies, but the unconscious, the bicameral Greeks described by Jaynes. Okay. How much time have I left? I forgot to take a clock with me.
You have about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. If that is the case, I will not go into the second example, but I will tell you what it would have been. Bloch also suggested that consciousness is a basic biological feature. And from that perspective, or for that reason, it is simply absurd, Bloch's words, to think that consciousness can be based on a concept, that you would need to have the concept of consciousness first in order to have consciousness. Basic biological features do not work that way. That's what Bloch seems to think. I thought of certain biological features. of which one would have to say that, quite the contrary, they are based on concepts. Their very nature and existence, what they are and what they do, is based on cultural conditions, is based on human concepts. And the things I'm thinking of there are primarily, now that's the most striking illustration, I guess, are diseases like SARS or AIDS. The pathogenic organisms involved, their very genetic identity, their genome, is determined by, well, in part by cultural conditions, such as international air traffic, or sanitary conditions, or well, what have you. Human concepts influence, or determine in part, are in part responsible for the very nature of the basic biological things in question. Why should the same not be possible? Why should the same not hold for consciousness? It's not obvious why it shouldn't. That's also one way of diffusing the intuitions behind Bloch's so-called argument against Julian Jaynes. All in all, I explore 5 of these routes, and none of them is successful, or so I argue. Which leads me to the conclusion that Greek zombies, Pace Bloch, are a very real possibility indeed, a possibility to be reckoned with. And what is more, I think that in the process of arguing against Bloch, very useful suggestions may be found, such as the distinction between A and B concepts, useful suggestions for dealing with other types of fringe minds other than Greek zombies. And that was the whole point of this exercise. Thank you. Still 5 minutes. Oh. Okay.
He lied.